It's time to complete your first quick page. The only thing left to do is to add a title. That's what we're going to do now. But before we get started with that, come over to the Layers palette. Make sure that you have the quick page at the top of the layers stack. You remember in the last lesson, we moved the photo down in the layers stack so that it would be behind the quick page. Make sure you have the quick page layer selected in the layers palette as I do here. That will ensure that when you add your title, it will add itself to the top of the layer stack and you won't have to move it. Now let's get started adding your title. You remember that I mentioned that in the tour, remember when I mentioned in the tour that in Photoshop Elements you always have a tool selected. We've been using the Move tool, and that's the tool that is automatically selected when you start Photoshop Elements. We use that when we move the photo around. This time we're going to use a different tool. We're going to use the Type tool. And if you move down the toolbar here, you'll see the Type tool. It looks like a big capital T. Click that once, and notice that the options bar here at the top of the screen has changed. I now have a selection of options for that tool. I can change the font, I can change the font style, the size, and other options. I'm going to do that now. Now I like the font that is previously selected. It was the font that I used the last time I used Photoshop Elements. So I don't need to change it, but I do want to show you how to select a font. Click the down arrow here right next to the name of the font. And a list of all of your fonts will pop open. If you can't see the ones at the top, just slide this up and it'll show you in alphabetical order all of the fonts that you have listed. Now I'm going to stay with Georgia. So I'm just going to click that again. And I want, since it is the title, I want to make sure that I use a bold style. I have 4 options with this font: regular, italic, bold, and bold italic. I'm going to choose bold. Next, I'm going to change the size of this font. I'm going to change it to 36 points. This little, box here is called the anti-aliasing selection. And what anti-aliasing means is that it smooths out all of the edges in your type so that you don't have it pixelated look like you sometimes see. It will be nice and smooth. So you want to make sure that is on. How can you tell? If it's darkened, it's on. Watch what happens when I click it. It is a toggle and it turns off. If I click it again, it's on. Now the last thing that I want to change is the color of this font. I don't want to use black, which is what the default is here. So I'm going to click this down arrow, and that's going to open a swatches palette. And these are the default swatches that came with Photoshop Elements. I can slide this up and down to see them all, or I can come down here to this little right corner and notice that my cursor changes to double arrows, indicating that I can resize this palette. So I'm just going to pull that down until there's no more slide bar here on the right. And once that disappears, I know that I have all of the swatches available. There are many other swatch catalogs available for Photoshop Elements, and we'll talk about some of those later in the class. But for now, I'm just going to choose this color. It's called dark red. So I'm going to click that and click this down arrow again to close the palette. So now I'm ready to go. I have my font, my style, and my size. And I know what I want my title to be, so I can just click anywhere here in my document window because I will have the flexibility to move it around later. So I'm just going to click once here, and you notice now that the cursor is blinking, indicating that I can begin to type. I'm going to type the word thumbs. When I'm finished, I will come back to the options bar and click this check block check mark, and that will indicate that I am ready to commit, that I'm done. So I click that, and now if you go over to the layers palette, you will notice that a new layer has been added. And I can tell that it's a type layer because it has that same capital T in the thumbnail that is used in the toolbar to indicate that tool. Now, I have another word that I want to add to my title. I want to use the word up for the rest of my title. So I'm going to click here anywhere, and Photoshop Elements remembers what I used before and leaves the setting exactly where I left them. But I want to make one small change. I like the font and the style, but I want to make this significantly bigger. So I'm going to come back to the options bar, click this down arrow, and select 72 points. I want the word up to be bigger than the word thumbs. Click that, and now I can type UP, and I also want to add a exclamation point. So now I have my title in place. The only thing I need to do is to click this, the check mark again, and again another layer was added to my layers palette, thumbs and up. Now, what if I don't like the position of my title, if I want to move them around? No problem. I'll just come back over to the toolbar, and I bet you can guess what tool I'm going to select. That's right, the Move tool. I want to move things, so I'll select the Move tool. Once I've selected the Move tool, I can move my title. Now, how did Photoshop know that that was the element that I wanted to move? Go back over to the Layers palette, and you'll notice that the last layer that I added is still selected. So Photoshop assumes that that is the layer that I want to work with. I do, so I'm going to just move this word up a little bit down. Now I want to work with the word thumbs. I want to move that word. I could go all the way over to the Layers palette. Well, it's not really that far, is it? But I could go over to the Layers palette and click that layer name in the Layers palette. But there's an easier way. Remember, we chose Auto Select. Remember, we turned Auto Select layer on in the last video. Well, that is still turned on. So all I have to do is click this word, and Photoshop will select that layer. Now, the reason you're seeing that blue box around it is because in the options bar, I also have Show Highlight on Rollover. By making sure, or by having that turned on, whenever I move my cursor over a layer, it will have this blue highlight. For example, it only works, by the way, with the layers that I don't have selected. Now, I already have the word up selected, so it's not going to highlight that one. But if I come down here to my photo, you can see that blue around that. Now, let's go ahead and select the first word of my title, thumbs, and I click inside that word. And if you look at the Layers palette again, Photoshop Elements has selected that layer for me. You can see it move from up to thumbs. Coming back to the layout, now all I have to do is click and drag. Hold down my left mouse button, click and drag this layer down. And that's it. If I want to deselect it, all I have to do is just click anywhere else. Now, right now, I have the Quickpage selected, which is fine. It gives me a nice clean view of my layout. But it's all done. I have my title, I have my photo, and I have this beautifully designed Quickpage that made it oh so easy. Now, that's the end of our first lesson. You have done and completed your first Quickpage. Congratulations! You're ready to play some more. In the next exercise, I'm going to show you how to add multiple photos to a layout and also how to trim those to fit a Quickpage.